Hi, Declan. Can you hear me and
I
see?
can indeed. Yeah,
Good.
just one back. Have you video?
Not yours yet, but I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, let me just see. Can I get video?
Take your time.
Hey,
There you are. Good to see you.
and there you are. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? How's your
Good.
day been so far?
Good, easy day.
Easy day.
Yeah,
Nice, nice. Good to hear.
yeah.
I'm so glad to be talking to you today. And before we start, maybe I give a little bit of an introduction. So you're joining us here for another episode of the Many First Conversations. And I think it's actually you are the expert, I believe, in creating first-time experiences. So you're definitely someone I would want to talk to for this. And yeah, because you are an adventure motorcyclist. And that's what you do, shall I say part-time? It's probably not correct, but you also do other things. You are also an engineering instructor at a college in Ireland, and you run your own technical training company. And that's somehow how we met. We were both in a marketing course. And that was also exactly around the time when I myself started to learn how to ride a motorcycle, and then found out that also for that you're a very good person to talk to. And since then, I've been enjoying, the stories about your adventures. So it's been very enriching and inspiring. And in addition, you're also a husband, a father of 5, and I understand all your family members have at some point been at least once on the back seat of your motorcycle, and you while you were riding through Europe. Talking about that, you have visited every country in Europe, is what I understand. There are more impressive statistics. I would like to share some of them here, but I think I would also like to suggest that I maybe publish a list of things, statistics at the end, so people can also read that. But maybe a few examples. So you just rode around the world, passing through 2 antipodes. So that's basically when there's 2 points on the Earth that are diametrically opposite. And the whole trip was 92,000 kilometers, which is about 57,000 miles. You're also a Guinness World Record holder for now let me get this right, for the longest motorcycle ride on ice off-road. That was in Siberia, I believe, when that happened, just before the pandemic. And you have, for example, also visited India. You were invited actually to ride through India, thousands of kilometers, and give talks to the local motorcyclists and to kind of encourage them to step out of their comfort zone. And you also jumped from the highest bungee jump bridge in the world, I believe. So these are just a few examples. So again, a very warm welcome. So good to have you here. I could go on with the statistics, but let's dive into the conversation if that's fine with you.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I would actually like to go to the beginning, maybe, if we focus a bit on the adventure part, if I may say so, of your life. Not saying that the rest is not also an adventure, but let's say the motorcycling adventure part. Why motorcycling? Why these adventures? And so when did it start? And do you think it will never stop? Or why has it been going on? Could you share a bit about that?
I suppose, Reggie, like any young chap in his late teens and the early 20s, I rode a motorcycle for a period of time, and we went and lived in the United States for a number of years. And I remember taking home a 20-foot container back to Ireland after 5 years of living in the United States. And we had come back to live in Ireland. And in that container was a motorcycle also that I imported from the United States. But subsequently, actually, I sold that motorcycle and I bought a carpet for the living room. And thus began a 20-year vacuum of no motorcycling, concentrating on raising small children and all that goes with it, and work and all of that. But I always did promise to myself that when I would retire, maybe again I would get back into motorcycling. And actually, when I was about 45 years of age, I went into work one morning, as I did every other morning, and a colleague never showed up. He actually died on his bathroom floor getting ready for work. And on that day, and he was only actually 50 years of age, and on that day, I promised that, you shouldn't be making plans for something that's way, way off in the future, when in actual fact, your life is now. And I found myself 3 weeks later riding a motorcycle from the UK back to Ireland that I had just bought in the UK. I was riding it about 40 kilometers per hour on the side of the motorway, being passed out by bread vans. I was so rusty, I hadn't rode a motorcycle in so long. And when I arrived back in Ireland, a good friend of mine said to me, "Do you know what you've just done?" And I said, "No, what?" He said, "You have just opened the doors to a whole pile of new friendships." And actually, how right he was. And sometime shortly after that, I rode the length of Ireland in one day. Then I tried to see, could I ride through all 32 regions of Ireland in one crazy day. I failed, but I came back and I tried it again and succeeded. And then went to the UK to ride from John O'Groats to Land's End, and then to Europe, and then. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I often compared it actually a little bit to, it was my version of narcotics. I started off small, but I wanted more and I wanted more and I wanted more. And I think for me, in general, my passion in life has always been people, geography, and motorcycling. And I found that these trips to Western Europe and later into Central and on into Eastern Europe and then beyond actually brought all three of those passions together, with the people that you would meet, with the motorcycling that you would do to get there, and the places and the countries it would take you. And it just went out of control from there.
That sounds actually like, yeah, it's just a self-maintained process, right? It just goes on, and you find new inspiration from every trip you take. I think you mostly go by yourself. Is that right?
Mostly, Reggie. I suppose a lot of what I did, I started in, we'll say, Ireland and then Central Europe and so on, And at that stage, I always took one of we have 5 children at home. I always took one. There used to be like a fight every summer about whose turn it is to go. My wife Jacinta actually accompanied me quite a bit on motorcycle trips, and because we would do things. For example, I would maybe ride out to Ukraine and on up into Poland with one of our children, and then fly home, and then maybe 2 weeks later, my wife and I would fly out and recover the bike.
Oh.
But I think when it went on then into more arduous countries with longer distances, then it became solo. Now, admittedly, I could have maybe found a friend or somebody to go with, but I found actually solo was a really nice way to travel, because in a way you're forced to make 100% of all your own decisions. You're 100% relying on yourself, and at the end of the day, and maybe only a solo traveler will understand, but the journey is 100% yours. And I found it very enriching and very fulfilling. And actually, nearly more than anything, I found it very much confidence building from my own point of view. Because, in my earlier days, like probably many other people of my age, we weren't really over bestowed with praise and all of those things in life. Confidence was something hard to come by, and actually in my younger years, a lot of school teachers might have mentioned, you'll amount to nothing more than anybody else. And I found with these crazy trips that I was beginning to be able to do something maybe above and beyond what I ever thought myself was possible. And one confidence leads into the next and leads into the next.
And still, I guess there are moments when it's hard, and there's many aspects to it. I mean, one element that I could imagine is maybe fear. And there I had to laugh when I saw once a comment from you somewhere about this bungee bungee jump, where you said there was a little bit of fear, maybe, and I'm like, okay, are you saying you were not, in that sense, afraid? Are you fearless, Declan, or?
No, definitely, Reggie, I'm not. But you know, I suppose if you put yourself into what people might describe as dangerous situations time and again, you do actually get very resilient.
Mm-hmm,
You know, I remember, for example, being quite fearful. I came down through Europe initially on this round the world journey and on into Turkey. And for some reason or other, coming into Turkey, I was thinking, whoa, I'm pushing off the edge of familiar Europe for me, you know, and now this is going to be fearful. But in actual fact, when I left Turkey, I looked back only with a smile on my face, and I asked myself, why was I so worried
mm-hmm.
about Turkey? It was great. And then, of course, you move on into Armenia, and I often joked about even the dogs on the street in Armenia are mean, but like Armenia was fine, and on into Iran. And people told me, whatever you do, please do not go to Iran. But most times these were people who had never been. And of course, after going to all these countries and always smiling with what's behind, you begin to ask yourself, why am I always fearful with what's in front? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and what is fear, and so on. And in actual fact, you know, over the years, I have found myself giving presentations to people in hotels and in schools, addressing that very subject of fear. You know, what do they say? They say fear is temporary and regret is forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I do recall being at that bungee jump in the bottom of South Africa. And I decided actually on the day, it was a 60-kilometer ride to get out there. And I said, look, it'd kind of be cool to see the bridge that these crazy guys jump off, you know. And I was interested in the whole process of a bungee jump and how it would happen. But I always promised that I would never do that. Now, I did jump out of an airplane. I did you know, a skydive from an airplane, but a bungee jump, if you pardon the pun, was a bridge too far for me. And I rode out there, and I said to myself on the way out, if all the conditions are right, well, then there's about a 1% chance that I too will do this. But thankfully, when I got out there, it was wind and rain and very few people. And I thought, great, I'm off the hook. And I remember riding back out of that place. And about 10 kilometers down the road, I said to myself, you know what? You are such a fraud. You go and you tell people to face the fears, and look at you now. And I rode for 20 kilometers away, and I rode for 30 kilometers. And after 40 kilometers of riding back to my base, I slowed down in the hard shoulder for a moment, in a moment of what I would call 50-50 thinking. I looked in the rearview mirror, there was nothing behind, and I banged a U-turn on the road. And I think from the instant of doing that U-turn, I was 100% committed. And I arrived there and I got the gear. And was I afraid? I don't know. I think I didn't give myself time to be afraid. I just said, look, give me the gear. Here's the money. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And of course, it's the very same situation afterwards. You know, you're looking back and you think, you know what? That really wasn't so bad after all. And I think that's a really common human condition where we look at what's in front of us and we perceive it to be something much, much bigger than in actual fact what it is. And then that's been my experience with everything in all of my journeys, that fear is something that can, if you take it too seriously, it can stifle your ability to walk outside your front door.
Yeah, it can paralyze, right? You mentioned something you call 50-50 thinking. What's that?
Well, that was literally where I pulled in on the side of the road to will I, won't I, will I, won't I? And that was my 50-50 thinking. And the will I, thank God, won over, because I really think I would never have lived it down internally in my own head. Because, you know, this was in South Africa, and then I was leaving to go to Namibia and on up through Angola and all of those countries on the west coast of Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria and so on and so forth. And I was really thinking to myself, you know, if you can't handle doing this, what confidence is it going to give you when you need confidence to finish this journey?
Understand. And it's actually, it answers already a lot of what I also wanted to make sure I mention or ask, which is, I believe, both physically and mentally, these trips and journeys have probably given you a lot. And we have mainly, or you have mainly mentioned now what it may have done for you mentally, right? This overcoming the fear and so on, and confidence building, probably also trust in yourself is what I understand. Now, physically, what do such trips do for you, or maybe with you, or to you in that sense? I guess they're different, but is there something that you could maybe elaborate on a bit in when it comes to really physically and the body experience?
They can be very difficult. You know, I tend to cover quite a lot of ground but basically I've taken 10 weeks off work unpaid for the last 8 years to do this journey.
Yeah.
So the first year was Ireland, Kyrgyzstan, second year Kyrgyzstan to Alaska, third year to Costa Rica, fourth year to Ushuaia, in the bottom of South America. I think the fifth year was up to Zambia, sixth year was to Senegal, and the seventh year took me back to Ireland. There was 1 year with nothing due to COVID. But some stages were much more difficult than others. For example, in Far Eastern Russia, you're riding day after day for 6,000 kilometers on a dirt road where there is little or nothing. And even in Mongolia, there are no roads. For example, in Mongolia, if you see a mountain ahead of you, you're riding across God's green earth, and you can decide, will I go to the left of the mountain or will I go to the right? And I remember one particular day, and of course I was camping every night, night after night after night, eating noodles and making porridge out of river water, filtered river water, and then talking out loud to myself during the day. You know, for some strange reason, thankfully I never got to answer myself back. But yeah, it's the loneliness and the isolation. And one particular day, leaving camp at 7 in the morning and making the next camp at 9:30 that night, 14 and a half hours, having covered only 124 kilometers. You know, and when you do that day after day after day, it's tough, and it takes its toll mentally, but it builds you mentally, but it certainly takes its toll physically. And I remember arriving home to Ireland, and my friends, of course, who would be very good at complimenting me, they said, "My God, you look emaciated." Emaciated, as in hadn't been fed for weeks on end, you know.
Yeah, like.
And of course, in contrast to that, if you're passing through the United States, or you're coming up through, as I did a number of weeks ago, through Spain and France, you're spoiled with everything, you know. So it's a journey of great contrasts, both physically and mentally and otherwise.
And I hear something else probably that's needed and that's trained on such trips, which is flexibility, right? So you cannot expect that you would be on a trip and always, for example, find the food you want or need, and so you need to stay very flexible. In terms of so you mentioned geographies and people and the motorcycles that are your passion. When you think about the trips that you've done so far, is it like, when I think in terms of, you know, the past and the present and then the future to come, we often hear that ideally we can stay present in a moment, right? That this is kind of calming for us and helps us also to not get into a fearful state if we don't project too much into the future and all the scenarios that could happen, or are not too hung up on the past. So when you're on your trips, where are you? Are you in the past, in the present, in the future, or everywhere, or nowhere?
I think you're mostly in the present. You know, for example, you know, coming up the west coast of Africa, every single day brings a challenge. It could be a border crossing, it could be a visit to an embassy to try and get a visa, it could be a visit to a customs office to make some document for the motorcycle. So I really think you're kind of living in the yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Yeah.
And maybe no further. And it's exactly like what you say. You can have the greatest plan ever to come up along the west coast of Africa and reach Gibraltar on the 1st of December, but
it may turn out differently.
Yeah, it may turn out very, very differently, you know. And I think probably for some people, maybe that's what gives fear, is when in actual fact you are not 100% in control of your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nature can dictate it, or border crossings, or people, or breakdowns, of which there have been many. All of these things can
Yeah.
dictate your schedule, you know, or dictate your plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think you say that there's countless breakdowns, right? That you have. I'm thinking it's the breakdown of the motorcycle, right? But it could also be physical and mental breakdowns. So I am not sure. Were there any physical and mental breakdowns?
I don't think so. No, but there's
No tantrum
I'm
somewhere.
thinking of some quite interesting experiences. For example, I remember being in Accra in Ghana in the embassy for Ivory Coast,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm being told some very bad news. And inside, internally in my head, I'm having a meltdown.
Yeah.
But externally, I'm trying to hold it together and to look positive and to be polite and to do all the things that will open the road of progress, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
you often can at places like border crossings, you're like two different personas. One
Huh.
is outwardly incredibly polite, and which is the only way to cross any border. But then often inside my head, there's a war raging about why did that stupid person want this signed or whatever, whatever. But of course, outwardly, you're so nice and so pleasant. So there is that conflict, you know. And actually, I've often found a conflict as well in things like, for example, I'm recalling on Lake Baikal, uh, jumping into the frozen lake at -30, uh, just to see actually what this will feel like if it were to happen accidentally. And it's very interesting what goes on in your head, because prior to doing this, every fiber of your being is telling you, no, no, don't do this. This is not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But yet it's like there's another person, which is the other me, saying, well, actually, I'm sorry, but we are going to do this. You know, and I've often found that in situations of fear, where you have one side of your body shouting out, no, 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 you shouldn't do this. And the other side is saying, well, look at, we've done the calculations. We know it's reasonably safe to do. And actually, we're going to go ahead and do it. It's like two people in the one head, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard that somewhere that actually I think it was nervousness. I'm not sure if it was fear, but nervousness and excitement are actually somehow very at the same place or happening at the same place in our brain. So it's literally about the twist that we give it, right? So is it either the positive in that sense or the negative, if you can say that. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, with regards to, let's say, if we leave the adventure life for a bit, and then the time that you were back home in Ireland, how much of that adventure motorcyclist lives on, you know, is with you? Are you very aware of that, and can you benefit from things that these trips teach you, or is this more like you're commuting between two worlds, or do they really integrate?
I think, you know, Reggie, one thing I found, whilst I love being on the bike during the 10-week period I'm away or whatever the trip is, I find I get an equal kick of sitting at home here in the back end of winter, planning and scheming for the next trip. So although I'm home, my mind still can be working on future projects, of which I still have a few. So there's that on the one hand, but on the other hand, I found I'm very good at kind of arriving home from, it could be from South America on or Far Eastern Russia on a Friday evening, and walking back into work on Monday morning, and just instantaneously switching from one track to another. I think you probably get good at it after a while, just because I've done it quite often. I'm home now. Okay, I'm back in work on Monday, but still at the same time, you know, I do, you know, I'm in the process now of planning for some future trips and making some research and connections and looking at maps and upgrading my motorcycle and all of that.
And are there any, like, let's say, character traits that you believe you have adopted on the journeys, on the trips, and they just are part of you now, in no matter where you are and in what kind of your life kind of
Yeah, one very big one. I'm
with
really incredibly stubborn.
I thought you would say patient.
Actually, I remember I gave a talk to our local school here one time to children in about fifth class. I think they'd be about 10 years of age. And my opening comment to them before I even introduced myself, I asked, so tell me, is there anybody in this classroom who would consider themselves to be a little bit stubborn? And of course, no child likes to admit to that. But eventually, after 2 or 3 seconds, one little boy sheepishly put his hand up. And I told him, I said, I like you. You will go places. Because I think stubbornness and determination are inextricably linked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one quality I probably do have. Maybe I shouldn't call it stubbornness. I should probably call it determination. But my wife would tell you it's probably more stubbornness.
Yeah, it's then also what comes with this is focus, right? I imagine you just
Yeah.
know what you want.
Yes.
And with that, I think it also helps you to get where you want to go.
Yes. Yeah. I would really be, because I remember, as I said, this motorcycle went out across Asia to Alaska, to the bottom of South America, to the bottom of South Africa, and all the way back up then to Gibraltar, into Spain, into France. And I was actually at Cherbourg, at the ferry port in Cherbourg, nearly in Ireland, nearly finished this entire journey. And the motorcycle broke down, and I had to push it 2 kilometers to the ferry in Cherbourg. And the police actually pulled in and they said, well, we can get you a trailer. And I told them, no. I said, if I have to carry this motorcycle on my back to the ferry, I will do so.
But
I think they just thought, look at this guy. He's for the big house.
Also in some kind of state, like so focused, like in the zone, like an athlete probably, just not seeing really fully anymore what's happening around, but just so focused on where you want to go.
Very likely.
Yeah, nice. Now, in terms of teaching, you're having these talks about your adventures and so on. Do you see yourself, because your business, if I put it this way, is mainly technical training still, but maybe it's a bit of both. I mean, is there how much business aspect does your adventure is this also a bit of a business, or do you want to keep it separate, even maybe consciously? Do you want to keep one as I don't know, adventure / hobby, maybe passion, and the other one as the thing that also gives you an income? Is there any such conscious decisions, or do you just go with the flow?
I think it's a very interesting question, actually, and up until now, certainly my business, the only purpose of it really is to fund these crazy adventures, But I do know of people, and I've met people over the years who they're probably they're commercial in what they do on motorcycling. They're traveling, their adventure is commercially driven. So, for example, maybe their motorcycle is sponsored by a particular company. So they spend a lot of their journey uploading social media and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
And a lot of people say it changes the adventure more to a business, and it's just not the same thing when you have responsibilities to a sponsor on the road. So I tend to keep the two of them very, very separate, Now, I mean, I would plan maybe to, I love to speak publicly, I love to advise people. I love to help people to be able to make such journeys. I would even propose to write a book. It's something I'm looking into doing.
So like sharing your knowledge and wisdom in that sense from all these trips. That's also a question that I would have had, as we're already approaching the half hour. It goes very fast. In terms of what would you, if someone says, wow, Declan, I'm so inspired by what you, how can I get there? Where shall I start? I guess I would need a motorcycle, but is there any other, kind of first steps or recommendations that you would give someone?
Well, I would say as well, in terms of help, and I've received so much help from people all over the years, people who have done like extraordinary journeys, way more than what I have done. And we're very fortunate to live in an era of such huge connectivity around the entire world. And that's been a huge help to me in all of my travels, to meet people on the road, even to be able to navigate or to find out information about visas or connect with people or find somewhere to sleep for the night or whatever. connectivity is absolutely super, you know. And I admire the people who have made such journeys 30 and 50 and 100 years ago. Like, they really are the heroes, more so than us guys, because it's so easy to do it now today in a connected world. And for somebody starting out on a journey, you know, and I'll give you a good example. My own daughter, Gemma, at home here, 28 years of age, she's bought a motorcycle, and she's told me actually that in summer of next year, I plan to have my test passed and I'm going to ride solo to Switzerland. And I think, wow, that's just super. Like, and my advice really would be that, look, start small. I started small. I rode the length of Ireland, which is only about 600 kilometers. And I thought that, whoa, that's super. And then I moved and I rode the length of the UK, and then I did something a bit bigger and a bit bigger. And so, yeah, I would, like, anybody can do it. You know, I really do think it doesn't take anybody special. I think the only ingredient you need is that little bit of stubborn determination that I'm going to do it, and start small. And like we said, through social media and all other things, there's a huge amount of people out there that are only too willing to give help. And there are so many resources out there. So I would say start small, do your research, connect with people. And, you know, the only limiting factor is you.
That's a very good final word. Thank you so much for these inspirational thoughts and sharings. I'll definitely keep following your journeys, and I'm looking forward to talking to you next time. Thanks a lot.
Reggie, I have to say it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Same here. Good luck with all your adventures, and tell your daughter that if she comes to Switzerland, she should let me know.
For sure, for sure. Thanks very much, Reggie.
Take care.
Take care. Take care.